flag continues in the text and images in the book. The flag ceremony that brings the U.S. occupation to an end in 1934, with the lowering of the U.S. flag and the raising of the Haitian flag, is retold in the introduction. Various political references to the flag are highlighted throughout, and the book's concluding chapter begins with the first reference by Duvalier, shortly after his election in 1957, to the Haitian Parliament of his intention to change the colors of the Haitian flag from blue and red to black and red. A symbolic end to post-occupation nationalism. In between these two events, the trajectory of post-occupation nationalism and its radical formulations is traced. Freed from the tight constraint of foreign occupation, Haiti in 1934 was an old republic that rose anew to the exciting possibility of political change. 1934, in the euphoria of the moment, was viewed by those who experienced it as freedom. For many nationalists, it felt indeed as if freedom had arrived. They likened the experience to a second independence, and President Vincent as the second liberator of Haiti. Few groups understood the importance of the period better than the nationalists who were part of the anti-occupation resistance of the 1920s. They received their tuition in the 1920s during that decade's literary protest, led by the great Haitian writer and educator Jean Price-Mas. Some participated in the Damien student protest in 1929 that sparked the events that led to the dismantling of Marine control. The dominant ideologies that grew out of the nationalist movement in the 30s were Noirism and Marxism, and the battle between the two is the substrate of much of the political narrative in the book. Noirism fashioned a modern interpretation of the Black Power ideas of the previous century. It was a powerful appeal to a race-based idea of political entitlement in a country that bore the marks of naked color conflict. But it was also circumscribed to a very small group of black intellectuals who spent more time involved in the writing of ethnographic essays than in political organization. Far more potent a threat for elite politicians was the Marxist movement of the mid-30s. In 1934, the Parti Communiste Haïtien, led by Jacques Roumet, emerged as an ideological counterpoint to the prevailing nationalism led by President Vincent. In a reflection on this early period, Roumet, writing from exile in New York in May 1937, would say of Vincent's politics, quote, "Some may give a somewhat too simple explanation for the election of Vincent, as a renegade to his past, as a Democrat, and opponent of the Yankee occupation. But such are the facts. There was a time when Stenio Vincent was together with some other politicians, the representatives of Haitian nationalism. This nationalism was born out of the suffering of the masses, out of their misery and their struggles against forced labor and expropriation. Though this nationalism might have inherited some of the patriotic traditions, it was, nevertheless, a conscious anti-imperialist movement based upon economic demands, and therefore it was a real mass movement," end quote. All of this was being subsumed, Roumet continued, under the might of the Vincentist state. Quote, "Together with the increasing development of the economic crisis in Haiti, the Vincent dictatorship is daily strengthening itself, adopting the most brutal forms of terror and repression," end quote. As part of this repression, Vincent saw fit to use his alliance with the United States to crush what his supporters termed La Peste Rouge in Haiti. Roumet and Max Udiku, another principal radical of the era, were forcibly exiled. It was not until later in the year that Roumet wrote that article in 1937 that the frailty of Vincent's rhetoric would be exposed. The slaughter of thousands of Haitians on the Dominican border provoked a diplomatic crisis that involved the two republics and the United States. In Haiti, it was a catalyst for a popular movement. Students and army officers, reacting to different motivations, issued a protest against Vincent. Quote, "We protest as blacks and as Haitians. We must defend our dead," end quote. That was the cry of student protesters at the medical faculty. A soldier in the Garde d'Haïti, which was the name of the Haitian military prior to 1947 when it became the army, shared this upset, saying, quote, "The Dominicans had already massacred thousands of my brothers, and I, in my uniform, was forced to sit and do nothing," end quote. The 1937 resistance to Vincent could not, by itself, overturn the dictatorship. It was far too feeble and easily contained. Vincent and his allies in the Haitian Guard were strong enough to preserve their status. Haitian radicalism needed only the spark of local events to coalesce. There was good opportunity for this to happen during the presidency of Vincent's successor, Élie Lescaut, in the first half of the 1940s. These years, which coincided with the Second World War, were important in shaping the course of Haitian politics. The new directions were in fact inspired by the war, which had two main effects on Haiti. First was a change in the relationship between the Haitian government and the United States. The practical need on the part of the Allied forces for alternative rubber supplies led to the establishment of a venture for the development of rubber in Haiti under the organization SHADA, which stands for the Haitian American Society for Agricultural Development. In spite of the intentions of the Haitian and US governments, it was an economic embarrassment in many ways, marked by ruin and a fair amount of displacement of Haitian peasant farmers. For radicals, it meant that the anti-imperialism, which Roumet mentioned in the quote above, would strengthen during the Lescaut years. The second impact of World War II on Haiti was ideological. Ideas of democracy, anti-imperialism, anti-dictatorship, and Marxism, which had influenced radical youth across the globe, found sharp resonance in Haiti. Moreover, the Lescaut government was wrongly perceived as being strongly supportive of the Haitian bourgeoisie to the exclusion of all other social classes. In short, Haitian leftists regarded Lescaut as a pro-American, corrupt, repressive dictator. Lescaut in reality was perhaps most guilty of a grave misunderstanding of the strength of the radical currents that flowed beneath his feet. His incapacity to appreciate this led to his demise. If there was a moment during the post-occupation when the possibility of lasting democratic change and social equality was most conceivable, it was in the immediate aftermath of the Revolution of 1946. The popular overthrow of Lescaut in January of that year, led by Noirists, Marxists, and populists, opened new possibilities in Haiti that were scarcely present before. Revolutionary overthrows were nothing new in Haiti. 19th century political history was virtually defined by them. But 1946 was, for its generation, like nothing else in the country's history. The leaders of the revolutionary movement had behind them a strong politicized class, insistent on political transformation. Again, as with 1934, a sentiment of new freedom emerged. In the evening of January 7th, stated one enthusiastic writer in a Haitian paper, we became free. The Communist Party compared the 1946 revolt to the Russian Revolution of 1917, and Duvalier himself likened it to 1804. For a decade afterwards, it would be a constant reference for leftists and conservatives alike, desirous of galvanizing popular support and justifying their legitimacy to rule. Indeed, for several years after 1946, January 7th would be commemorated in the Haitian public space as a date of remembrance, much like February 7th, 1986 in our own time. There are numerous examples of how the explosion of 1946 affected the thought and writings of Haitians of the era. But it is to the rich mind of Haitian culture that we find some of the best reflections on its impact. In a poem entitled Le Proletariat, published early in the year, the poet noted, quote, "It is too much, my patient says. Vincent and Lescaut now have a reason to make room. They go to hell cursing the proletariat. I am a proletarian. It is not a dishonor. On the contrary, to be bourgeois, I believe, is unfortunate," end quote. Another poem, entitled Le Rouleau Compresseur, the steamroller, celebrated the strong physical presence of Port-au-Prince's popular classes on the political scene in 1946. Quote, "The fanaticism of Bel-Air, the revolt of La Saline, the wheelbarrow man in the markets who groans under his burden, the woman who displays in the dust to sell her merchandise every day in the harsh sun for a pittance, the marchand of crème, pâté, biscuit, tablet, all the poor who suffer miserably, the intellectual army, blacks willingly decided to construct, adjust, and consolidate in harmony. It is the steamroller," end quote. This dramatic image of the steamroller and its magnetic pull, some may recognize as a reference to the most popular of the many radical personalities to rise in the aftermath of the 1946 revolution, Daniel Fignoli. Through his incredible charismatic appeal, strong class-based ideas, and formidable leadership of his party, the Worker and Peasant Party, MOP, Fignoli defined much of late 40s radicalism. Considered a threat to all political forces up to the election of François Duvalier, he was unrivaled in his reach. Fignoli was, nonetheless, unable to translate his incredible popular strength into state control. The Haitian military, bourgeoisie, and rival Noirist elites saw to that later that year with the election of Dumarsais Estimé. He also found rivalry, that is Fignoli, with the Marxists in the PCH and the Socialist Party, and of course, with the United States. It is in the intense rivalry among these forces that we find the undoing of the promise of January 1946. The reluctance of Fignoli, the Marxists, and other groups to band together served to increase their vulnerability to state repression. The state itself, though having the advantage of local power, had to contend with problems on an international scale. Estimé was determined to make a mark on Haitian history. He made credible attempts to achieve this through his promotion of labor organization, increasing the minimum wage, and supporting nationalization efforts, and also the creation of the bicentenary celebrations in honor of the founding of Port-au-Prince. Recognizing that the fervor of radicalism in the wake of 1946 placed incredible demands on his presidency, he sought early on to change the facade of national politics. New politicians from the black middle class dominated, and the traditional leaders relegated to background positions. The majority of urban Haitians expected some sort of deliverance with Estimé. A popular Marian song of 1946 stated, quote, "Estimé will make the people better. Don't touch Estimé. Estimé Zoclimo. And if you trouble Zoclimo, you'll fall like domino." Zoclimo being a Haitian loi. But as a seasoned politician, Estimé knew that to keep power, he had to cleave to the main power brokers on the political scene, most importantly, the Haitian army. Moreover, US-led anti-communism, which expanded after the war, forced the United States to view with caution Latin American and Caribbean administrations that had suggestions of radicalism in their government policies. Estimé was far from being communist, and frequently tried to convince US officials of this. Nonetheless, in the diplomacy of the late 40s, a president that relied on the appeal of class change and equanimity in the color balance of the country would be looked at with concern. Estimé's rivals capitalized on this weakness and saw in his attempt to succeed himself a betrayal of 1946. They worked together to overthrow him in 1950. And here again, we find another one of those echoes in more recent events in Haiti. Ultimate power, nonetheless, remained in the hands of the army. From that moment onward, radicalism in Haiti suffered a slow descent. Paul Magua, the military president of most of the next decade, gave little space to radicalism. Nor, of course, did the United States during the McCarthyite 50s. The radicals who tried to maintain a presence on the political scene were routinely barred from public access. Newspapers, an important outlet for political resistance in the post-1946 period, were suppressed. The communists and labor militants were barred from political activity. Some radicals of the 40s, such as René Depeste, were banned from entering the country. Magua said, "Depeste is not a Haitian, he's a communist." Others, like Fignoli, modified their approach in order to maintain relevance. A troubling aspect of the 1950s suppression of radicalism was an increasing resort to violence. When Magua, who like Lesko and Estimé found himself on the losing end of a battle for self-succession, went into exile, this violence intensified. The fair selection campaign that followed was a last-ditch effort by the political actors of the previous decade to gain political control. Fignoli became a provisional president in May 1957, a moment of personal achievement for him and a reawakening of the ideals of 1946 for his followers. He did not last a month in office before being removed by more powerful army leaders. He left Haiti and settled into near permanent exile, a dejected man, disappointed no doubt in the course of events and fearful for the future of his country. Having worked closely with François Duvalier, who was General Secretary of Fignoli's party MOP in the 1940s, He appreciated the dangers of a Duvalier presidency, which by June 1957 was the likely result of the election. Duvalier's ascendance marked the end of the post-occupation, the radicalism that defined it, and, in many ways, the dream of freedom stirred by the events of 1934. What then might we learn from the contributions of the men and women who, in the 2 decades before the establishment of the Duvalier state, fought for democratic and more inclusive Haiti? Was the failure of post-occupation radicalism a causative factor in creating the way for the dictatorship that followed? This question forces us to return to my earlier point about the perceived inevitability of Haitian political crises. In 1911, 4 years before the Marine occupation, the esteemed Haitian writer and politician, Antinor Fiamme, made his final exit from his native land after suffering a third dismal defeat in his bid for the presidency of his country. Fiamme's supporters and contemporaries, both in Haiti and outside, I might add, called him the only hope for Haiti, a civilian intellectual leader with popular support who represented a break from the power-hungry generals who ruled during the late years of Haiti's long 19th century. More important, Fiamme was held as a beacon in the struggle against encroaching foreign intervention. His loss was a great blow. Aboard a steamer headed for St. Thomas, where he would die a few months later, a broken-hearted Fiamme wrote a farewell to Haiti, which included these lines, quote, "I desired your well-being, to take you as the hen takes its chickens under its wings. You have not wished so. I abandon you to your fate," end quote. What did Fiamme see as Haiti's fate in the pre-occupation years? Did he regard his failure to achieve his goal of taking control from the hands of the contentious military leaders as a factor in placing Haiti on the path to US control? Put another way, was Haiti destined to be occupied by the United States? We could ask similar questions of the post-occupation. Indeed, Fiamme's words could have easily been penned by Daniel Fignoli en route to his own long exile. Was Haiti destined for Duvalierism in the post-occupation years? As I argue in the book, there was little predictability about the path Haiti took to 1957. That the administrations that emerged after the occupation resorted to autocratic forms of rule says more about the fundamental problems in the administration of state power than to a despotic determinism. There had long been a tradition of dictatorship in Haitian political life. The force of radicalism in the post-occupation, however, demanded that the political space be widened and this practice of dictatorship uprooted. As one young student writer noted in the student paper La Ruche in December 1945, quote, "We have given ourselves to a new politics. This new politics is national, anti-bourgeois, democratic, and socialist," end quote. All the political figures of the era were forced to claim some form of allegiance to this new politics, from Vincent's anti-imperialist nationalism to Duvalier's anti-Milanoism. A new constituency, resistant to traditional politics, placed new demands on the country's prospective leaders. The fact that in the intense battle for state control, these ideas were progressively stripped of their meaning does not detract from the importance of the process that created them. If there's one lesson I hope this book imparts, is that there was a moment, albeit brief, where this process did create change in the pattern of Haitian politics, and in spite of its consequences, left an imprint on the country's proud history. It is the story of this transformation and the people who made it that this book tells. And it is their vision and obstacles for an alternative Haiti, a Haiti quite different from the one we know, that I hope is revealed in its pages. Merci, and thank you.
We have some time for questions, and what I'd like to ask is, if you do rise, please take the time to introduce yourself so we can know who we have the pleasure of discussing with this evening.
Hi, Alex Lichtenstein, one of our colleagues with Dr. Burness at FIU. You allude to sort of internal disputes between the PCH, the socialists, and Fignoli, I guess an independent Marxist. But I'd be curious if you could sketch out for us what some of those disputes were about, both in terms of internal domestic politics or maybe the agrarian questions about important one, I guess, but also in terms of foreign policy, and particularly relationship to the Soviet Union. 46 is a really long period for the PCH, I would imagine, given the shifts in Soviet policy.
Yeah, well, first of all, clarification, Pignoli wasn't a Marxist, and like Esme, who I mentioned, also fought very hard to dissociate himself from the Marxist tendency in Haitian politics, and also the socialists and the communists. Especially in the 1950s, when anti-communism became so strong and vibrant. Insofar as the internal debates are concerned, a lot of the debates centered around the way in which they saw how Haiti should be administered. And one of the problems that I found with it is because so much of this was so new to the political culture of Haiti, that the programs and these debates and so forth didn't really take time to form or to kind of congeal, so to speak, because there's always this competition, there's always this move to try and gain a certain degree of control. But that said, much of the nature of these debates in 1946 had to do with who should run Haiti. And on that level, you see these traditional issues of color and class coming into play. And what's very interesting about that, I'm glad you mentioned the 1946 and the impact it would have on the Communist Party. The Communist Party in Haiti in 1946 was actually led by an Episcopalian pastor, Dorian Just Constant. It was a very different Communist Party from 1934 when Roumain started it. And it was a Communist Party that while, it's a Communist Party that while having strong claims to class change and so forth, had equally strong claims to the color issue in Haiti. And that is where you begin to see some of the overlapping of these different themes. The Socialist Party tended to kind of be more stringently class-based in its argument. And then you begin